I don't know why we're starting this on time. I've never started anything on time, but I think we're almost ready. Okay. Hello. We're about to begin now. My name is Paula Vogel, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're going to have a discussion with our panelists of the Droll, and we will first have a discussion amongst ourselves and then open it up for questions from the audience. I would like to first say special thanks to a number of people who've made this possible. Sam Rudy, our press agent extraordinaire, Rosie Strube, our producer, BJ Evans, Ryan Pointer, our associate producers, Rachel Spencer Hewitt, our assistant producer, Catherine Costanzo, our magnificent stage manager, and Tanya Dean. I love saying this about you, Tanya, who joins us all the way from Dublin, our dramaturg who will be leading the discussion. Meg, I think you have as well. This is our playwright, Meg Miroshnik. I think you have special thanks as well.
Thank you, Paula. So an enormous number of people shepherded this play into existence, but I just wanted to thank, in addition to Devin Brain and Tanya Dean, a few of the people who directed workshops and or gave feedback on in-process pages. Jonathan Loma, Christina Anderson, Deepika Guha, David Chambers, Lynn Nottage, Mia Ravigno, Ken Preston-Inzi, Louisa Prosky, and Blake Hackler and the Undermain Theater, which produced a beautiful world premiere of the play in 2015. And then, of course, very special thanks to Paula and the whole Bard at the Gate.
Thank you. And I'd also like to add to our list of thanks, James Bundy, Artistic Director of Yale Rep, and also all of our deans at this table at Yale School of Drama. So it's a delight to start this conversation with our director, Devin Brain, our dramaturg, Tanya Dean, and our playwright, Meg Miroshnik. Tanya, take it away.
Thank you so much, Paula. So the way we thought we'd work this Zoom post-show discussion, perhaps for some people pre-show discussion, because the play is streaming until the 19th on YouTube, with a conversation with Meg and Devin as the director and playwright about their thoughts about how they first came to the Droll, what this new iteration was like, and where they have hope for it to go in the future. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to questions from people in the metaphorical room, or the Zoom, I suppose. So if you have questions, do feel free to put them into the chat box. Our amazing producer and wingwoman, Rosie, is going to be collating them, and we can answer them as we're going. And we're also going to invite the actors to join us at that point as well. So it's a cliche, but let's start at the very beginning. Meg, you have this lovely note in the script of The Droll, which can be downloaded from paulavogelplaywright.com, where you describe it as a love letter to actors. Can you tell us a little bit about where that idea came from and how you developed it?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. So as Paula mentioned at the beginning of the recording of the play began as a bake-off, which was a 48-hour process. I was responding to a set list of ingredients and some Shakespeare plays. So that was really where the pages began, but I had actually been thinking about drolls for a little while. I took a theater history survey course in grad school and saw an engraving of a droll, and it featured, Falstaff and like the Gravediggers and all these other iconic clowns together on stage. And there was something about that kind of epic, like, crossover event that kind of piqued my interest. And so I started doing a little bit of research, and then found, the history of theater being officially closed in London during the 18 years of the interregnum. And this letter that the actors of Blackfriars had written to Parliament after the theater had been closed for a year, begging to be able to perform again. And they make this whole case about how they've been trained up in the theater since they were children, and they have absolutely no other skills, and their children are starving. And it was just such an emotional and affecting plea. I felt like somebody was kind of reaching through the centuries and grabbing me by the arm. And it felt so accessible, and the precarity of it felt, I think what a lot of theater makers felt even in that moment, which was 10 years ago or more. I was thinking about that, and that was sort of where the Droll was born once the Bake Off challenge was posed to me. And I've thought about it a lot since. There's something about a lot of people didn't stay in the profession during those 18 years. So there's a member of the King's Men who became a jeweler, and you see all these accounts of actors becoming soldiers, and just thinking about who can afford to continue to do this thing that all of us, fall in love with many times as children, felt very urgent then and now to me.
Okay. And from that, we get this kind of beautiful play world. Devin, I might turn to you on this one. So you directed the first workshop production of this at Yale School of Drama in 2009. And if memory serves, I was your dramaturg at the time, if memory serves, we had a budget of $200 and a full glorious 2 weeks of afternoon rehearsals to put this gloriously complex and rich world on stage. Can you talk a little bit, like, what was it like to present something this complex and beautiful within those kind of limitations, and what it kind of taught you about the piece?
Let's see. Yeah, we had a total of 80 hours of rehearsal, give or take, including tech. Split over about 2.5 weeks. And I really remember quite clearly reading the play the first time, after having been given all of those logistical demands by my faculty, and with every scene feeling this sort of gut punch that was a combination of terror and excitement, because I really loved the play. And it should be pointed out that the play at that point was also 3 acts, and ran more like 2 hours and 45 minutes, all told. So it was a substantial work. But there's actually something really freeing in trying to do something that impossible. Like there was no chance to do it full justice. So there was an ability to just focus on what we could actually do. And in this case, what we had was the actors and the words. So we sort of focused the process on making sure that we built the deepest connection possible between those performers and those words. And since Meg wrote such gorgeous language, that actually worked pretty well. Although I had a lot of faculty looking a little askance when in a 2-week process, I think we spent 10 days at the table talking about the play before we started actually staging it. Yeah, I remember getting a lot of notes about that. But we spent all of that time really building a connection so that Tanya wrote an entire lexicon just for this world that redefined every word. The actors brought in research that connected the interregnum with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the rise of the Communist Party in China, the rise of like German fascist parties, you name it, we probably connected it so that we had a sense of the true depth of the world that Meg was creating. It was actually really freeing and terrifying.
Freeing and terrifying is a pretty good précis of that, if I remember. Okay, so we had this kind of love letter to actors. We had this kind of beautiful drawing from history. We have a gloriously mad and terrifying and exhilarating rehearsal process to bring it to the stage in 2009. Flash forward almost a decade, more than a decade later, the world is going through a pandemic. Paula Vogel tweets very rightly that the Droll is a play that speaks painfully, clearly, and beautifully to this moment. Off the back of that, the amazing Rachel Spencer-Hewitt, who played Doll Cuppers as well as being associate producer, emails all of us and says, guys, I have a mad idea. I think we need to get the band back together. And proposes that we do a Zoom reading of the play as a fundraiser. So we get much of the original cast, and we welcome a few new faces together. We have, once again, far too few hours, and this time we're trying to connect 3 different time zones to rehearse this piece. And we're trying to translate this gloriously complex, consummately theatrical world to a 2-dimensional screen in those few hours. For both Meg and Devin, I might start with you. How did you find trying to translate the Droll to Zoom speak?
Deeply frustrating. I love this play. And coming back to it, especially being able to come back to it with the bulk of the original cast, felt like coming home. But the play is also vibrantly theatrical. It's so much about what happens between the living audience and those performers. There are entire scenes that are performance numbers that are direct addressed to the audience, that are about getting responses from them. And Zoom is difficult to navigate, finding a way to do that. I actually think, just like when we first did it, the trick was mostly letting the actors play. The places that felt like they were the most successful in some places of matching this text with this form was when Rachel and Brett allow their characters to really interact with the cameras, allow them to sort of have a different relationship to that space than anyone else has. Rachel's skull burlesque was really great when she was doing it on James Bundy's lap in a theater, and is still really pretty awesome when she's doing it straight to a camera in a way that almost feels like, well, contemporary porn. Those things are really probably exciting. Some of the other scenes are just, it's difficult to engage, but probably no more so than any reading. Readings can be amazing and frustrating.
I'd imagine.
For me as a director.
Did you find that you learned anything new, Devin, coming back to the script at this point in history? Or were you looking at, was there anything that you found afresh in it?
I mean, I don't think when we first did it that the idea of plague and a theater being closed for indefinite periods of time, like those were, despite all of our efforts, like intellectual ideas that sounded horrifying, but didn't quite have the like sink in your stomach. Every one of your colleagues is currently concerned that they have just lost their livelihood and have no idea when it will come back. So it gives a different punch to some of the scenes where the actors are talking about it. And when they talk about plague and sickness, and that has a different tenor to me now. The same way that watching TV and seeing someone hug feels different now than it did 3 months ago. You're like, oh, that feels unsafe.
Completely. And Meg, how about you? What was it like coming back to the Droll at this point in 2020?
Well, I was very grateful for the opportunity to go back into the play. I went back to the research initially because I did actually do quite a bit of rewriting for this process. And the thing that struck me in the research was how, I think when I first wrote the play, I had this sense of, okay, the theaters are closed for 18 years. But of course, at the beginning of it, nobody knew how long this would happen. And there was definitely a sense in the primary historical documents that people expected it to open at any moment. They thought they were actually accustomed to closing, as Paula noted, or I think you did, Tanya, for a couple months at a time. And they sort of felt like they would tour in the country for 2 months and then come back home as they usually did. And so there was something about that, the uncertainty, which of course, I think I'm finding personally the most difficult thing to manage in a lot of ways, that felt very immediate. And I was excited to be able to, not excited, I think that's the wrong word, but it felt like a relevant piece of life experience that I gained that I could put into the script at this point in time.
Yeah, I think there's something both empathetically very powerful because of how painfully relevant it is about watching a group of performers try and make a livelihood when the one thing they love doing and the thing they've spent their lives training for has been declared illegal or temporarily closed down for the good of everyone. One storyline that really struck me afresh on this experience of rereading the Droll in this particular moment is the storyline of Thomas Dread Rosie. And there's just something about this character who's dedicated their whole life to the theatre, who is such a lover of theatre and a proponent of this art form. And throughout the play, they slowly come to this realization that the art form that they love so much is unequal, is an institution that has been supported by an oppressive regime, is reflective of an imperialist ideology, and that has either unconsciously or deliberately excluded people and stories that they deemed were unsuitable or not of interest to the majority or unworthy. And I think watching this right now in the midst of, particularly in the American context of Black Lives Matter and movements like We See White American Theatre, it's a very vividly and importantly uncomfortable feeling to have of looking at theatre and thinking, how can something I love so much be part of a system that is so unjust? So I suppose I might turn that to you, Devin, and then to you, Meg, about how has this moment made you think about what you would want for the Droll and what you would want for theatre?
Sure. I mean, for the Droll, I would hope it has a life beyond myself and the original ensemble. That it has a life that allows it the gift of working with a wide variety of people and the ability to sort of represent the real cultural and racial breadth of our current community. I think that's essential for it to sort of become the play it should be, which is pretty parallel to what I think about the American theater. I think the hardest part for those who are running theaters right now, who have been supported by theaters for a long time, is looking at their work and realizing exactly how many voices their industry has silenced rather than, and if that's true, then every effort has to be made to reverse that and to lift as many voices as possible, which is exactly what is actually encoded into Meg's script in terms not just of Thomas, but of Droll, a voice that was utterly silenced by that industry, her surroundings, and that sort of she had to fight to find a new voice. I think the entire industry has to sort of rip itself apart and then hopefully put itself back together in a fashion that allows for that to happen. And in Thomas's story, the part that I also find really fascinating is that there's a parallel in Nim, because Thomas, Jared, Rosie, they don't just leave, they leave the theater. They decide that art is in fact not enough. And that, looking at Black Lives Matter comes to mind, is telling a story enough right now, or is direct action actually what's required? The theater doesn't change laws. It doesn't change or burn down systemic institutions. Thomas wanted to actually go to war against the powers that be. And then on the flip side, you get Nim, who decides to spend 18 years making art in the shadows, still pursuing and changing his form to bring laughter to somebody. And there's something about what art is capable of doing. We can't change the law. Hopefully we can change the culture a little, let people think a little differently, show them a different way to dream. And again, the only way to do that is to lift up as many different voices as possible, to lift up as many ideas as you can. And that's enough for me.
Thank you so much. Meg, for you, what would your hopes be for the Droll and for theatre moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think to piggyback on what Devin is saying, I think that there was something about going back to this piece with actors. I'm very collaborative in a room. I like a lot of, stimulus in a room. So it was exciting to go back into our virtual room with actors who were having a sort of similar experience, having worked on the play a decade ago and then coming back with these new lived experiences. I think it made me think a lot about the training, because I wrote the play in a training program, and Rosie's arc, I think, is a lot about the training, how Rosie harps on sort of the technical capabilities that have been passed down through training programs, and this idea of training actors into a default voice and physicality, which of course is not neutral at all, right? It's it's a sort of default male, default white, default able-bodied, cis, heteronormative voice and body. And I think a lot of the reasons given for doing that have to do with Shakespeare, the ability to perform Shakespeare. And so thinking about that in the context of this play, and gathering together performers who had experience with the play, many of them in this training program, and the sort of default whiteness of that, I think, is an interesting thing for me to confront and to think about, as Devin is saying, how the next step for the play could include many more BIPOC artists and many different experiences with, you know, Rosie discovers that James Killingworth, this person that they've loved, you know, as a performer and a human being for years, has actually been gatekeeping. And I think to discover that, or not discover, but to look straight in the face the institutions that I love or have been attached to, like Shakespeare, and discover, again, not discover, to sort of confront the ways in which those institutions gatekeep, I think has been a focal point of the rewrite for me, and I think where the play should go.
Thank you so much. And I think that actually ties in so beautifully as well into kind of what the whole Bard of the Gate project has been espousing so eloquently and passionately. What we might do at this point is tag in our amazing actors who are joining us at this talkback. So if you guys want to switch on your cameras and your microphones, and we'd love to open it up to all of the attendees. If anyone has a question, if you want to type it into the chat box. Rosie Strub is going to be our deft fisherwoman picking out all the questions, and we can ask them to Meg, to Devin, to any of the actors. Rosie just reminded me that it needs to go in the Q&A box. Apologies, I'm new to Zoom webinars. I'm doing the best I can for the technology. Whilst we're waiting for questions to come in, Rachel, do you mind if I start by asking you a question?
Right.
So you're not just performing Droll, which is the role you originated, you were also kind of like a shining light bringing this to the stage, or I suppose to the screen again. What is it about this play that after 10 years you wanted so passionately to see it again that you basically bumper stickered it onto a screen?
Yeah, well, you know, it didn't have to travel far in my mind to reach the very front, because Droll is one of those characters that I feel once you enter her heart and soul, once you feel that heartbeat, it doesn't leave you. It's one of those heartbeats that changes your own, right? So this is far and away one of the best theatrical experiences I had had in grad school, and it's up there even with the experiences that I had had. And so with Droll, throughout my 20s and early 30s, my experiences as a young woman in the professional theater would often recall things that Droll had said, and I was like, oh, the things that I knew to a certain extent, I'm now understanding her deeper and deeper, sometimes very unfortunately, in terms of the way that, you know, women are treated and rejected or used and dismissed. And then, you know, what that does in terms of saying, all right, well, I'm a survivor, I'll do my own thing. And then the direction that it could potentially take you. I thought of her when the Me Too movement happened, and I was like, oh, what she could have done with that sort of empowerment and liberation and community. And so she's been visiting me throughout my career and comforting me and holding me. But then when the theater shut down the day after my birthday, and I just saw all the lights go dark, right? It took me to the moment of finding our light on stage of the Droll and saying, what would happen if the space where we were standing, I think it's when we entered tech, that we were talking about what would happen if the space where we're standing were illegal. And everyone was talking about, you know, we can't even enter those spaces anymore. They've been shut down. There's a ghost light. And I was thinking about the Droll so much that I had a dream about it. And it was the next day that I saw Paula Vogel post, and I was like, well, I'm definitely going to be haunted by the theater ghost for the rest of my life if I don't send this email. And the reason is because I feel a lot of us are grieving. I think a lot of us are feeling uncertain. And the fact that this band of players stuck together, and that, you know, Droll never got over really the loss of being left out of the conversation, of being left out of the troupe, is just such a testament to the fact that we're talking about, you know, jobs being lost, talking about like Margaret's constantly saying we have no money, we don't have money for food, we don't have money for this. These are basic human needs that aren't being met. And one of them I would put on the list is the fact that the way that we create and communicate with the world is through play. And when that's not available, when physical contact with other people is not available, theater artists experience that loss in a different way. And I thought, well, there's a whole play written where these characters get that, and it's an opportunity to communicate that not only to an audience at large who I think sees so much humanity when they get to experience this play, but also for each other, to remind each other that there's a reason we do this. It's part of our makeup, it's part of our language, it's part of our love language. So what does that mean when we take a good look at the problematic infrastructures when it gets shut down and taken from us, and we have a chance to say, okay, well, who's going to continue playing? Who's going to continue telling these stories, and why? And since those were questions that were being asked all over the internet, and I remembered them from the Droll, I even found my title page with all of those notes on there, saying the same things. I just knew that it was a story that had to be shared. So, yeah.
That was an incredible answer. And I love the fact that you got a small supporting understudy behind you just in case you needed somebody to step in.
She's actually my producer. She's
Gotcha.
very strict, but very good at what she does.
We've got a fantastic question in from Sarah Rule, which is for all the actors. So, Blake, I might start with you on this one and then move across the line. Can you feel as though you're acting with each other in Zoom? Can you graft your experiences of being with one another from rehearsal onto being in your own room and on Zoom?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the toughest part about Zoom is right now I'm looking directly into my camera so that you have the experience that I'm talking to you. If I were to look at you, this would be our conversation. I'm looking at you where we are on the screen, and it seems as if I'm not engaging with you as much as you were. So this is tough. This is the tough part. But what it does is it allows you to use your actor tools of listening. Those have to really sharpen. So I receive so much more in the subtlety of the voice that I might have relied on my eyes before, which sounds like a crutch, like, oh, I was using my sight as an actor before. But I think that's the biggest difference, is that it is this kind of like halfway there, and I see shadows of you peripherally on the screen, but I need my eyes to be in the camera for the audience to feel that we're talking to each other.
Okay, that's fascinating. Rachel, same question. How have you found kind of trying to translate your experience of Doll onto a camera?
Yeah, I would say to start with what's lost is the vibrations that you get physically standing with someone on stage. It's like so much, at least for me, of hearing what that actor is saying is not with my ears necessarily, but like the temperature changes on stage when someone's body temperature changes, and you can feel that. And when you're listening with your whole body, you respond to the temperature change. And then when you're staring at a cold screen, you're like, the cues have to be something different. And so it did feel in the rehearsal process that it was about almost like training hunter instincts, like training those instincts of listening to be almost very visual, like Blake said, when you were able to engage with what was happening on the screen, and then very aural when it came to having to hold the focus of the camera. And then the camera also became a character almost, that like, here was the eye contact. You're going to share the message with Brett, or you're going to share the message with Blake. And I do feel, one of my friends texted me about it. She was like, oh my gosh, someone just spat on your face through Zoom. Because I felt like one of the successful moments was when I had found the camera right at the moment that Brett spit, but the sound of the spit is what made me physically react. And so that, like the musicality of that choreography, as that the way that it played for us, was that the spit hit me because it hit my eardrum, and so the rest of me could react. And so I do think it's possible, and I'm very interested in how our theatrical capability to listen with more than just our ears, like with our whole selves, starts to almost like Spidey sense or superhero training, starts to develop advanced skill sets of listening to each other through a cold screen, because there are still human cues and nuance coming through. It's more just about, are we going to be able to develop to hear it and respond as quickly as we've learned to listen physically? Yeah.
I'm going to unmute myself, and then I'm going to ask Zach the same question.
They just started jackhammering above me, sorry. The same question, repeat that same question, because I got lost.
Myself again.
Yeah.
How did you find the complications of Zoom when
Yeah.
you translate your performance?
I mean, the eye contact is the trickiest thing, and in watching it back, if I was criticizing my work, I'd be criticizing it in the way that I'd be criticizing on camera work, in terms of the smallest move of your eyes is a huge change and can be very distracting. And the simple difference of right here, me looking at where my script would be versus then looking at Blake's square to try to make eye contact with him, but then realizing I actually have to look at the camera for the eye contact. So those quick little moves, when you watch it, all of a sudden look like the character has shifted focus 3 times. So the next time I do one of these readings, and I've done a few and I'm still working out the kinks, I think the interesting thing is to figure out how you can keep some of that stillness and focus in the eyes so that when you want to change focus, it actually does something. And that's camera acting work. And it's tricky when you have text here and a camera there and your actual scene partner is somewhere in one of these boxes and you have to find them. So that's a new skill that we have to adapt to in this medium.
Which I think you all did astonishingly well. Like, it's only when you talk about how many plates you were spinning for this that it becomes apparent how much of a ninja piece of work it was.
Yeah. Well, and just also to follow up, it's figuring out what you want the size of the performance to be. And my other criticism, I'm not self-flagellating, but it's just interesting to see how these things read, is when I watched it afterwards, I actually felt like I could have been bigger. I think I brought down some of my energy, feeling like, okay, I'm doing camera work. It's right here. It's a small medium. And watching it back, I was like, actually, I could have energized that about 15, 20% more, and it would have helped. So
that's a really interesting insight into your craft, but I don't think anyone was watching going, oh man, that needs another.
No, we're going into
10 to 16% maybe. Yeah. I might turn the question over to Matt McGrath now, because Matt also joined us specifically for this reading. So how was it doing an almost cold read of a not uncomplicated script as part of a Zoom reading that got recorded a rehearsal later?
Well, I mean, I did touch on this script of Meg's, this beautiful script, 10 years ago at Pacific Playwrights Festival at South Coast with a whole other group. I mean, pretty much, but yeah, I mean, this company was fantastic. So I felt like I entered this entire world that was already played and, you know, still fresh and all of that. And they work so well together and they're all so phenomenal. What a company. So stepping in was easy, but I do not have a firm purchase on the Zoom thing. Like, you know, unlike film, you don't have, you know, it's not picking up as much as you would hope it to be. You know, I mean, your voice kind of needs to kick in first for a minute, and anything can like bunk you out. But no, I feel like I've had a couple of runs at you know, screenplays and things like that on Zoom, and it's funny. These actors and, you know, the stage actors kind of understand, you know, how the technical is going to be perceived a lot more, like Zach was talking about, just so much more apt at it than some of these film actors. I mean, I don't want to bash anybody, but they do have a firm purchase on where to look and stuff like that. I found it very dynamic that way.
Dynamic's a lovely way to put it. And just to finish off this question, I might bring it over to the West Coast, to Brett. How did you find bringing your 2020 interpretation of Roundhead to a screen instead of a stage?
Oh, tough, not easy. But also, this was a completely different character than what we did 10 years ago. So it was nice to have another run at it. I also don't remember a pre-show thing at all. Maybe I'm wrong here, Meg, but I don't remember quite as much of a pre-show thing, if there was one. Yeah, I mean, Roundhead is just such an interesting character because he's a stand-in for so many things, and there's not just one Roundhead. He's kind of a composite of a lot of different things. So when you see me wearing glasses, that's a different Roundhead. And then in the end, with the echoing, and there's supposed to be a lot of Roundheads coming in with the theater. That's also, you know, it's almost like a force. Roundhead is almost like a force. The first one you see is a very theatrical version of it, who, strangely enough, is using the same techniques that actors do, except instead of giving a performance, I'm giving a pulpit speech. I mean, what is the difference, really? They're both performances. And it seems like this particular iteration of Roundhead was also, there was a kind of theatricality to it. There was more of a politician to it. And I think that there was a real joy of theater, actually. I mean, there were so many moments in there about, you know, oh, see, I know my cue. Oh, it's quite an exit, quite an entrance, huh? You know, there were so many like little things where there was an appreciation for these things, these techniques. I may not have loved what they did on stage, but boy, can they make a speech. It was almost as if I was taking notes along the way, how to use those very same techniques for my own purposes. Yeah, I really felt that there was a little bit more humanity to him as well. I think in what I was bringing to it, but also in the text. And so it wasn't just so much of, you know, axis of evil, I am representing this thing, but like I was someone who was against theater, but still theatrical. I hated what you guys were doing, but I loved how you were doing some of these things. So it was very interesting. It was really, really cool. I loved the rewrites as well. I don't know if we've said that. I think I joined a minute or two late.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We have a
long answer for that one.
Detailed. We have a follow-up question for Meg about this idea of how the Droll in any kind of future production, which we hope it has, can do more work on behalf of making theatre more welcoming and more open. The question is, would you be open to expanding Thomas Dread Rosie's role and description to include trans GNC representation, or including more BIPOC folks when casting something like this, instead of simply wishing for more from theatre? I think that's something you were talking about doing even whilst you were doing this reading.
Yeah, but I do take the question about wishing. I think there's something the kind of I guess inspirational and revolutionary aspects of the We See You white American theater demands, which don't allow for symbolic support. They demand structural change. So it's not enough to say, I wish this were different, if you're not going to demand equity riders on every production that you do. And so I think there's something about the requirement to get, you know, your own house in order that I think is very powerful and effective. So the short answer is yes. I think the discovery in terms of Rosie's character, because Matt played the character in Pacific Playwrights Festival in 2011. Irene Sofia Lucio had played it in the Yale workshop, was sort of to, in this moment, be specific about the character's gender identity, because that wasn't something that I had the words for, I guess, in a way, in 2009. And so I think that, you know, saying that Rosie is not trans, but Rosie is, you know, a gender non-binary person who has played women's parts. And there was a rewrite about, you know, Nim saying Madam, Sir, and Rosie saying just Rosie, that was my way of trying to address that. But yes, those are excellent questions.
And we actually had a conversation about that just in terms of the script, on just the kind of really kind of editorial kind of tweaks of like, let's go through this one last time and look at pronouns to make sure that there's an articulated choice that this character is non-binary, as opposed to there being hangovers from previous drafts, that this needs to be stated.
And we did in fact show this draft to a trans actor and talk to them about the role and had them weigh in to guide it in this direction. Their point of view was sort of where this character landed in this particular iteration.
Yeah, I think we should also point out that the work for this was to get to this reading, rather than this being the full stop for Droll's life. It is in the hopes that this will find more space and more support to develop the play it can be. So it's not that these choices are the end point, it's that they are the seeds we want to see blossom for this. Is that fair, Meg?
I just jump in here too, is that and just to take it further, I know in conversations with everyone on this call and from past workshops of this play, that regardless of the way that the casting is done in our reading, in no way should this play be seen as a strictly white or white presenting cast. That there are truths in this play that no one on this call would be able to glean from the idea of being marginalized and rejected by the theater infrastructure, that by being possessed and owned and taken artistically and as a social understanding by a Black or Indigenous or a person of color or an entire cast, to engage with what does a conversation mean when the theater is shut and we have to recreate it. I would say, and I'll speak for myself, and I feel like there are others on this call who would agree with me, that this play should absolutely be seen as one that is not limited to a world of players who look like the people on this call, and that it can only be illuminated even further by Black, Indigenous, and people of color who would take this story and engage with it fully. I know that those are conversations that were had in the process leading up to this reading. And so, I hope that anyone who does take this play and run with it that way, please invite me to see it, because I could only learn from it.
Absolutely. We have an interesting mirroring. We've got the same kind of question being asked by two different people. So this is coming from Sarah Rule and from Brian O'Donoghue. It's a question for Paula, which is, what was it like for you to revisit a play that you loved as a teacher and that you saw that first workshop production of at a different moment in history?
Well, I have to say that one of my difficulties with American theater is that we are separated into actors, playwrights, directors, and we all become kind of itinerant workers, that we may encounter each other one-on-one in another production, in another theater company far, far away. What I loved about the forming of this, and I actually feel this in the play itself, the reason I love training programs and the reason I think these extraordinary works come out early in a writer's career is because they are in a village. And that they are not writing in isolation, that the rest of their careers ask them to undergo. So this notion of company, there's a conversation that I very much feel in the formation of this play between Meg Miroshnik, Christina Anderson, and Dibika Guha, who are all class members. There's an ongoing conversation, I feel, with these actors of the entire school of actors. And there is a way that we converse that I feel the play gets stronger as artists know each other more and more and more. What this country does not allow us to do is actually have companies and repertory where our conversation can only deepen. Instead, we're seen as producing a product that is a one-time deal and a one-time handoff. So there's something very significant for me watching people now in a different stage of their lives as artists coming back to this material. I would love to watch the company come back 20 years from now and again do this. And I'm not so sure right now as we're envisioning what should theater look like, that actually we have strayed into the commodification of theater by allowing institutions to set us apart and then bring us temporarily together versus creating a lifespan of work and conversation with each other. What if we could form the company we would like to keep? What would the Droll be then? That we bring it back every 5 years or so. You know, and in my mind, it's very moving to me to see Zach now playing a 70-year-old, whereas he played it 10 years ago, is quite, you know, quite delightful. But there is something about us thinking about a company that embraces diversity in gender and race and class and ethnicity and nationality, that we, treat each other in such a way that we do last a life. Very few companies in America. And I think they've created such extraordinary work. But I do feel that there's an ongoing conversation with all the artists that were with us on the journey in 2009. Very fortunate that at the end of our series, we'll be doing Good Goods, which I believe was that in the same, it was, wasn't it? It was the same festival, which again is extraordinary. And it's killing me not to have a conversation with Tibika Guha, who is one of the extraordinary writers in the American theater. So what is it like? To me, it increases my hunger to see if we can create a company that is artist-driven, that is driven by a continuing conversation rather than selling a play as if it's a hot pancake. And that's one of the questions that I have for all of us. How do we actually form companies and continue the conversation and not be broken apart? What would that look like? And this is not to say that the gatekeepers are necessarily the enemies. I think that we've created a system where we have believed that there's a limit to the supply and demand of art. Whereas this play actually proposes that once you create the supply, the demand increases. And what has happened to me watching this particular one, having been in the room with everyone here when they were much younger, is I'm astonished by how much the desire has increased to see you and to see the play in production in the flesh. So that is what I'm hoping that this series does, that we start looking at what plays are we not serving. The American theater did not serve Kernel of Sanity. The American theater did not serve the Droll, nor did they serve Bull Rusher, nor did they serve Good Goods, origin stories. I could do another 5 series. Seriously, I could run this thing. And that's not right either, because in truth, if we thought about this as a company, then the aesthetic should shift to another aesthetic view. So I really loved the revisiting. I've wanted to revisit this play for a long time. And like you, Rachel, I woke up the morning after we shuttered the theater and went, holy crap. I'm kind of used to this now after 40 years of watching younger writers. The notion of prophecy from writers is not a strange one to me at all. That younger writers are keying into something that is in the atmosphere and the oxygen, and they put it down on the pages. And it becomes truer as time passes. And that's certainly true of the Droll. But this time around, I'm looking at where are we as a class in American society, those of us who are artists. Are we going to be accepting that? Is there a way to change the class and social dynamic of what we do? And so I think I'm asking different questions, but boy, it's amazing to see this. And I feel very frustrated because, I go running out of Providence or New Haven and I go running down to New York and I'm like, I just saw the most amazing experience knowing that people may never see it because of the way the theater is set up. And it is that we, not only have we been profligate with actors of color, with BIPOC artists, not using them to the full expression and potential of their gifts. How can we throw away that magnificence? We do the same thing with plays. And I think we need more companies, frankly. I think we need more theaters. I think we need to participate more in the management of companies as artists. Long answer.
An extraordinary answer. Brett, do you want to chime in?
I have a question. I mean, do you think that now, because people don't have to be, let's say, on the East Coast in New York going with, do you, this might be even a better time to get things out there? Can you guys hear me?
Cutting in a little bit, just to paraphrase to make sure I got your question right. Your question is, given that we're all in these such strange circumstances and people don't have to be in certain places, is this a better time to get these plays out on the radar? Is that correct?
Is this a better time to be doing this now?
Because Paula, I really agree with you, what you said, that there's, if we build it, will they come? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry. Yes.
Well, I think
it was a brilliant question, brilliantly asked, but thank you, Internet.
The vagaries of the Internet. I think, unfortunately, we don't have time. We had some fantastic questions lining up, but unfortunately, we don't quite have time for them. However, it will be quite hard to follow Paula's answer, so I think I'm going to quite gratefully pass the mic back to Paula to wrap up and talk about the next plays in the series.
Listen, I can't thank everyone enough for bringing this back, a glimpse of this back. And I am also hoping that theater makers will be able to watch this and determine that when we reopen our doors, we will reopen with a play like The Droll. That's my hope. We will be coming back in September with 3 more plays that I can't wait to share with everyone. The Extraordinary Bull Rusher, written and directed by Issa Davis, will be presented September 16th and 17th. If you have not seen this play, and it's not done as often as it should be, and most of all, it's not done on the main stages of our theater companies that have the resources to do it in the way that it should be done. And I have a tiny little story to tell about Bull Rusher, and a funny thing happened on the way to the Pulitzer jury, but I'll leave that till then. We then follow with a play which has never been produced, because people say it cannot be produced, written by Dan LaFranc, written in 48 hours as his Wonder Woman Amazon Warrior Queen bake-off, called Origin Story, written as a graphic novel that I experienced with ART acting graduate students in 5 days of absolute bliss. And this will be directed by Christopher Bays in early October. And you will not want to miss this. This has never been done before. And I think that this play encapsulates joy. And then lastly, we will be finishing on October 29th with Good Goods, which I know we have seen. It's one of those plays that we will carry the rest of our lives, written by the brilliant Christina Anderson and directed by Patricia McGregor. And I do want to say that this is my way of hoping that we can have a national American exorcism right before our election in November. So please join us. We will be back with you in September. We're already making preparations to get the next cast in rehearsal. I want to thank everybody for seeing this. And please know, if you missed this first premiere, please tell your friends, tell a friend. This is up on the site until July 19th. And again, my thanks to all. Take care. See you for drinks at the bar. Take care. Bye.